that some sets of people made a policy decision at some point, I think in the late 1960s, made a policy decision that in order for the United States to grow the way that they said they were going to make the United States grow, we would have to lower corporate taxes and kind of tinker, but very slightly, with income taxes, but lowering income taxes as well. The idea was that if you left a little bit more money in people's pockets, that would feed the consumer part of the economy. And if you left a lot of money in the corporate, barons' pockets, that will spur them reinvesting in their businesses, expanding their businesses, hiring more people, and it would just rain money on everybody all over the country. I think we'll see from this analysis that I'm going to share with you that that's just patently not true. So when you listen to these people, listen to what Kevin McCarthy and his band of whatever they are, what they say. We've got to spend less money than we spent last year. That's an irrelevant statement. If you have enough money to be able to pay your bills, it doesn't matter whether you had more or less. If you only have to have enough to pay your bills. That's what revenue is supposed to be doing for you as a nation. They say that we have to leave money in the hands of the job creators, the corporate barons, the people that own industry. Well, we've done that several times, and it's never turned into what they say it's going to turn into. The corporate barons all get fat. They can't even go into Walgreens sideways because they can't fit there's so much money in their pocket, they can't fit themselves through the door. So they have to hire us to go to the door and shop for them, right? And, it has never worked out the way that they have claimed it would work out. So the argument that we're having now, it's not even a real argument. It's really the Republicans saying that we have a bottleneck that's been created by the way the rules have been set up in the United States. And the bottleneck says that the House of Representatives is the only one who can generate a bill that produces money, that appropriates money in the United States. That can only be done by the House of Representatives. So when the Republicans have control of the House of Representatives, they can obstruct the adoption of a budget. They can obstruct raising the debt ceiling. So that's what they're doing right now. They're saying we're not going to raise the debt ceiling until you give us what we want. And what they want is lower taxes for the wealthy, lower taxes for business with the same rationale, but it's supposed to spur the economy and create more jobs and more income and so on, which it never does. And simultaneously, they're saying that they want to reduce spending on the services that the citizens of the United States have collectively agreed amongst themselves they wanted done. Citizens of this country, I know maybe you all didn't hear about it, but citizens in this country wanted clean water. Do you remember when there was some not clean water several years ago?
Oh yeah.
In Flint, Michigan?
Yes.
You found out that there were citizens that were hired by the United States, paid for with our tax dollars, whose job was to watch the water, to make sure the water was clean. Turned out the people weren't watching the water. They were getting paid. All those people in Michigan that are supposed to be watching the water, every one of them got a paycheck every 2 weeks. All of them got retirement bonuses, and the whole thing. But the water wasn't clean. How did you feel about it when you found out the water wasn't clean? How'd you feel about it when you found out that in Buffalo, the water in Buffalo has more lead toxicity in it than the water in Flint, Michigan? Today, still has more lead toxicity in it than the water in Flint, Michigan.
You're kidding.
I'm trying to help you understand. So you keep hiring people, but you keep playing with these political, postures and so on.
But the mayor said that we have improved with our water system.
Our rhetoric has improved.
Rhetoric.
We have really good rhetoric.
Okay.
But our water is still not clean.
Wow.
Our pipes still have lead in them.
Wow.
Our schools are worse than the homes.
Wow.
In terms of lead in the pipes and so on. My point in saying all of this is the services that are being paid for with our tax dollars are services that we asked for as citizens. We wanted veterans to have better health insurance. We wanted people who were low income to have access to quality health care and not be trapped out of health care because they didn't have enough money to be able to pay Blue Cross and Blue Shield, $12,000 a year for a health insurance policy, and so on. That's what taxes are for. The taxes are to pay for the things that we as a society want done for us collectively. The things that are done most effectively are done collectively rather than being done individually. We could leave it up to everybody to provide their own health insurance. And if we did that during COVID-19, there'd be another 100 million people dead on the streets of the United States. So let me just try to get into this a little bit and help us to understand this conceptually. For the White House's projections today are that personal income taxes are slated to contribute about $2.35 trillion to the overall revenue of the United States. Another $1.59 trillion is going to come from payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are your FICA, your unemployment tax, and so on. And then there's going to be another $1.10 trillion. I'm sorry, that includes Social Security, $342 billion for Medicare, and $55 billion for unemployment insurance. Corporate taxes will only amount to $284 billion out of the total $4.05 trillion in tax revenue that comes into the United States. Only $284 billion of that is going to come from corporations. It's almost like corporations aren't paying any taxes at all.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how big the corporations are, Norm.
Right.
How much money? I mean, the gross domestic product in this country, which is sort of like the gross volume of how much money is made by business as a whole, is $31.4 trillion. To get to that number, the corporations pay only $284 billion.
Right.
What is that? 6%? 5 or 6%?
Very small percentage.
And then we're talking about we can't we can't pay our bills, right? You got to lower spending. We can't increase revenue. It'll hurt job creation. We got to lower spending. No, we need to do with our corporations the same thing that other countries that are Western capitalist democracies, what they do with their revenue. They tax their revenue at about 34%. And that turns into the services that they provide for the people in their country.
You know what, Mr. Hare, depending on what the corporation makes, I would say, I know you can't, I know you could tax the corporations directly a certain amount, but if a corporation makes so much more than other that highest corporation should be taxed the most, and it should trickle down.
And that's exactly the way it used to be up until 1969. It used to be that corporations had what we call a tiered, a progressive tax. Just like for your income taxes, our progressive tax, your corporations paid a progressive tax. The first $5,000, no tax on it at all. The next $25,000, was a certain tax rate. Then the next $50,000 was another tax rate, and so on. That's how things got done. But sometime in the 1960s, during the Richard Nixon administration, I guess they hired Richard Nixon, because I'm thinking that these corporations just hire these politicians. We think we're electing them, but I'm not sure that's true.
They're in the budget.
I think they're in somebody's budget, because Nixon comes along and we go from a 38 or so % tax rate for the top end income. That tax rate fell down to 21%. And it stayed at 21% for quite a bit of time. Then it began to progress back up again, but Donald Trump sent it right back down to 21%.
Wow.
If the tax rate had been left at 35%, if they just left that tax rate alone, that would have added over $1 trillion to the overall revenue of the United States.
Mr. Hare, it's just like you say. It kind of boils down to the self-interest of those particular people, the fat cats, and the ones that are in the decision making process, and they do everything they can to try to keep that, you know what I mean, very very low for them and higher for the people.
Now, you would think with 331 million people in this country, roughly 200 million of them are voting age, able to vote. Why aren't we voting these people out of office and putting people in office that are going to take better care of the citizens of this country?
Yeah.
It's because people keep making us think that things are connected that aren't. What I mean by that is people think, well, if you have higher taxes, that means the federal government's going to get more of your money. You know who those people are? Those feds. They become the others, right?
Right.
And so we don't want to give your money to these others. But those others are the people that see to it that when the banks somehow misplace your money, somebody shows up and sues the banks on your behalf and gets your money back. When bridges fail, Willie and I were talking about this several years ago, and I talk with our producer, James Brown, about this all the time. We had a bridge fail in Minnesota.
Yeah.
With 69 people on it because no one had repaired this bridge for something. I don't know if they never repaired it, but the bridge was like 80-something years old, and it looked like nobody had done anything to take care of it in all that time.
Mr. Hare, what is our, how much do we have going out towards infrastructure? I mean, it's a very important thing. And
well, you figure that the infrastructure bill that President Biden led getting passed last year, that the Republicans are doing everything in their power to repeal. The infrastructure bill had something like $150 billion in it for American infrastructure.
Okay.
Infrastructure pays for bridges. It pays for roads.
Right.
It dredges, creeks and rivers and bays. It makes repairs for airports so that you got, landing area and takeoff areas for airports. It is the pipes that get your water from Lake Michigan into your house.
Well, when you really look at it and the way I'm thinking of it now, everything you said, it's a life supporting thing. Very, very necessary.
It's a social contract between us. Mm-hmm. Why bother to be the citizen of a country if the country that you're a citizen of doesn't do anything to take care of you?
Yeah.
I mean, they should defend you, but they should also provide services, to you so that we collectively can have a civilized society where we're all living together. We're not at each other's throats because everybody is dog eat dog against each other. That's what the purpose of taxation is. It's to ensure a certain quality of life for everybody within your country. And so I was just going through, I went through something with the Tax Foundation, and they were helping me to understand how these dollars work. And it's interesting. Follow this rationale. Budget deficits ballooned following the Reagan administration, which decreased income and corporate taxes in 1980. It was in 1980. The deficit as a percentage of GDP, let's see, Reagan was in, I said 1980, is that right? Yep. Reagan lowered taxes from, I think it was the top end was 50%. It dropped that top end rate of taxation for the highest end of income down to around 39%. As a consequence, the deficit grew from 2.6% to 4.9% because money that you were taking in, you stopped taking in. Since you don't make anything, if you lose revenue and you don't replace it with some other sources of revenue, you wind up with less revenue. But your cost of doing business still stays the same. You still got to pay for the people that what do they call those people? The air traffic controllers, right? Remember when Ronald Reagan attacked, them, and they went on strike, and he basically abolished the air traffic controllers union and so on. But the consequence of doing that was we had loss of service, in the airline industry. It took a long time, to undo the damage that was done there. Then, as a result of the Bush administration's personal income tax decrease in 1990, when taxes were lowered by 10.5%, the deficit as a percentage of GDP grew from 3.7% to 4.4%. Again, we're losing ground. We're making decisions where people are telling us that if we lower taxes, it's going to increase business. And because it's going to increase business, we'll end up with more money to tax. So we'll end up with more revenue. But it doesn't work out that way. Every time they do this, we end up with less revenue and we still have more expenses. In 1993, Bill Clinton became the president. He was the first one for a long time prior to that who actually went to raise taxes. Bill Clinton took our tax rate. Let's see, he increased personal income tax from 31% to 39% from 1993 to 2000, which lowered the deficit in 2000 to a $236 billion surplus, and the nation's actual debt was brought down to $18 billion. Think about this now. Bill Clinton's last year was 2000. This is 2023, so 23 years ago. Bill Clinton's last year, we actually had if I remember this correctly, right, we actually had a debt. We had a surplus that year of $236 billion, actually positive net money to the federal government in 2000. But our national debt was only $18 billion.
Wow.
Now compare that to today's national debt.
Yeah.
$31.4 trillion. So because of the decisions that were made by the people, and I'm not going to take any ownership of this. You all hired these people. I asked you not to hire these people. I fought really hard to get you not to hire these people. But you hired George Bush. You hired these people anyway. You hired Donald Trump. And the price that you paid for these 23 years is you went from a $236 billion surplus, which you asked me about, a few weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
And I told you we would get to this, right?
Yes, sir.
We went from a $236 billion surplus in the fiscal year 2000 to a $31.4 trillion debt.
We got a caller, Mr.
Yeah, let's get that caller on. Hi, caller, are you there?
Hi, Mr. Hare. How you doing?
Hey, James, how you doing?
Good, sir. I know that you made a point of the government possibly being responsible for some of these broken bridges, but isn't it incumbent on the people to, decide who, by voting, who runs these programs? Aren't the people ultimately responsible for who's in government?
Absolutely. So politicians sell people on the idea that if you hire this guy, he's tax and spend. He's going to take your money, your taxes, and he's going to spend your money. And you don't want that. You want to keep your money. See, they seduce you with that. Then you hire people that claim that they're going to give you lower taxes and still provide you with services. They lower taxes, but they don't provide you with the services. And you end up with no services, and you end up with deficits. That's exactly what you're absolutely right. People should stop listening to these folks. They should stop allowing themselves to be seduced. Just because the ones that talk about they're against taxing and spending also say that they're concerned about the great replacement theory, don't let them tie these things together and get you seduced into thinking that one thing is connected to the other. Whatever your feelings are about whether you think this country is going to become a majority-minority country, that's got nothing to do with the fact that you can't pay your bills unless you have a proper tax rate, and you have to hire people that serve you who actually will provide the service to you that you hire them to do. They should check your water. I mean, wouldn't you expect that somebody would check your water?
absolutely the water and certainly the infrastructure regarding the bridges.
And I know when James and I talked about this is many years ago, but it's hard to get the image out of your mind. You actually saw people driving over this bridge, and the bridge fails with
That's
these
right.
cars on the bridge. You see people's cars with people in them sliding off the bridge into the river and so on, right?
And people getting killed, I do believe.
69 people were on the bridge. I think there was something like 17 or 18 people that died as a result of that catastrophe. That should not have occurred. This is the United States. We're supposed to be the most sophisticated people on earth. How in the world can we not know that our bridges have not been inspected and that the bridges are going to fail if we don't get to them? How can we not know that?
So it's ultimately the people who have to be more concerned with who's in government and who, because ultimately, if these programs fail, the people are not involved enough, I think.
See, it's just like what happened with the pandemic. When people were really scared and they were focused on making sure that people didn't touch each other and everybody was getting tested and so on, the pandemic was at a certain level. Then, because you had these redneck people that said their freedom was being attacked, because they had to go get tested, so they started advocating for people that were anti-testing, anti-vaccination. So Donald Trump joined that group of people because he wants to be on their side. As a consequence, we went from being scared when there were 30,000 people a day getting infected, when we got to like 4 or 5 months in this anti-vaccination thing. Now we're getting 120 million people every day. Not 20 million, a million people every day getting infected because we listened to the people that were anti-vaccination and didn't listen to the people that said, I'm not trying to take over your government. I'm not trying to rule over you. I'm just trying to keep you alive. We should have stayed with those people and not hired people like, the people that Donald Trump represents.
Well, maybe we can afford, maybe we can improve with Mr. DeSantis being in office.
Yeah, right. That should really help.
What?
That should really
Come on
help.
now.
This is a guy. You remember the young girl? I forgot her name. That read she was the poet laureate. She was like 21 years old. She became the poet laureate for the United States. She read this poem that she wrote for the inauguration of Joe Biden.
I saw that.
They.
Amanda Gordon?
Amanda Gordon. They have decided that the poem that she read was subversive.
Which it wasn't.
They said it was subversive, that it raised up people's feelings of hurt and shame and hate between groups. It was divisive.
Right.
How in the world you could have heard that poem and got that kind of message out of it, I do not know. But it's because the Republicans just tell lies over and over and louder, and they get the media to go along with repeating the lies. So even though the media didn't say that Amanda Gordon's poem was divisive, the media repeated 150 times a day that the Republicans said it was divisive. And then they showed you, see this section right here? That was divisive. Without saying this is dumb. Who are these people that are saying that the media should have been doing stories on the people that were saying that stuff and make them look ridiculous? That would have made more sense. But that's not how the media plays in this country, because the media is owned by the same people that lowered our corporate taxes, lowered our personal income taxes, put our budget out of ballot, put us in a position where we spend half on ourselves that people in other countries who are our competitor countries spend for services for themselves. And we wonder how come we're going out of the world backwards. Of course we're going out backwards. You can't go any other way. If you walk backwards, you're going to wind up being further backward than you were when you started walking.
Yeah.
It's just common sense. Go ahead, James. Did we lose James?
James, are you there? We must.
All right, we may have lost James.
Yeah.
We'll get him back if he needs to. If he had another point.
Yeah.
So Bill Clinton took us from deficits to surpluses, wiped out our debt entirely, put us in a position we were having $236 billion surplus his last year in office, on our way to wiping out our national debt entirely the next year.
Yeah.
But I told you about hiring people. You got to be careful who you hire. So George Bush comes along and he says, well, you know, all those Democrats and whatnot, all they want to do is tax and spend. And the reason why you got these surpluses is because the Democrats were taking too much of your money. That was the problem, right? So how do you know they're taking too much of your money? If they got a surplus, that means they collected more money from you than they needed. So we're going to give you some of that money back. We're going to lower your taxes. So the reason why you had the surpluses is because of the policies that Bill Clinton had put in place to create those surpluses. But when you replace Bill Clinton with George Bush, he didn't have that same policy. You know, they gave up on those policies. They repealed those things. They stopped enforcing those things. And so we went right back into deficits again.
Yeah. And I bet you.
In addition to that, you know, we had 9/11. Remember, you can't predict the unpredictable. Who could have thought that people are going to fly airplanes into the two World Trade Center buildings, you know, and kill almost 3,000 people? Who could have predicted that? Then we had to go to war, which I told you, I've said many times, we didn't have to go to war, right? We just needed to go find the people that did this stuff to the United States and do whatever it is we felt was justice, you know, to those people. But there was no reason for us to go to war against Afghanistan. Afghanistan had nothing to do with the attack on the United States. I'm not even sure anybody in Afghanistan knows where the United States is. This is a backward country. You know, this is a mountainous, you know, sparsely populated, you know, a body of land and people. This is not a place where there was no reason for us to go to war against Afghanistan.
Right.
We could have done a police action against the Taliban that were offering this land for sale or renting land, you know, to these Saudi Arabians. We could have done a police action on them, did what we had to do, and then gone back about our business. Why do we have to fight two wars, anti-terrorism wars, one in Afghanistan and one in Iraq, that we spent 23 years fighting these wars and we have nothing to show for it? I mean, we have absolutely nothing. What do we have in our hand from Afghanistan? Got a failed Taliban government over there. What do we have in Iraq? We got a barely can stand up, you know, government in Iraq that doesn't even like the United States. But all of that is on George Bush's watch. So we went from surplus to deficits.
Yeah.
Right? Again. Then under this, let's see, what was it, the second? Under Obama, the personal income tax increased. Obama got a little bit of Bill Clinton's, you know, science, and said maybe we ought to increase revenue in order to get rid of our deficit and our debt. So Obama increased personal income tax rates at the highest end from 35% to 39%, just a 5% increase. That was in 2013. That lowered the deficit from $680 billion to $585 billion in 2016. The problem for Obama was he didn't have a consensus amongst the Democrats, you know, to have them all behind him for the things that he was trying to do. Everybody was trying to pick at him to get what they wanted,
right?
And wouldn't let go of the things that needed to be let go in order for us to get success on our revenue and our expenses. So we'll talk a little bit more about this on the other side of the break. Hopefully this is making some kind of sense for you. I wanted to give you some context as to what's been going on in our country. So if you all stick with us, we will see you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY.
They are our love bugs and companions. They are our pets, our family, and they make life better. When we face unexpected challenges, so do our pets. That's why we're on a mission to support people and their pets. Whether donating a bag of kibble, sharing an Instagram post of a lost cat, or welcoming a foster pet into your home, every bit of kindness counts. Visit petsandpeopletogether.org to learn how to be a helper in your community. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
91.3 FM WBNY is proud to present Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
Welcome to Democracy Now!
Award-winning investigative journalism.
Is the NRA imploding?
Providing relevant analysis that makes you think.
Secret State Department documents, including evidence of U.S. war crimes.
Fact-finding reports you will not hear elsewhere. Democracy Now! Airs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on 91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo. Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. All right, welcome back. This is L. Nathan here. Welcome you to our program, Living for the People. We're here with Norm McCarthy, who is our in-studio audience of one, and our citizen of the 21st century, Willie H. Welcome, guys.
Welcome, Mr. Hare.
So I wanted to give you a little bit on your cousin, Donald Trump. I know you all don't like to admit that he's your cousin, but we saw it on your family tree. He was there. Donald Trump lowered personal income taxes from 39.6% at the beginning of his term. He lowered them down, this is in 2017, lowered personal income taxes down to 37%, so roughly a 6.5% decrease in personal income taxes. But corporate income taxes, he lowered from 35% down to 21%.
Hey, Mr. Hare, I'm going to be the devil advocate
Sure.
today because I was having a big discussion with some people, and we was talking about Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And we was actually comparing the difference between when Trump came in, what happened in our neighborhoods, our black communities, and then even when compared them with Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And we was starting to come up with more improvements with Trump than Obama, like just looking at our communities.
So I need to know what it is that you're talking about, because remember when you talk about projects that are government projects,
Right.
to fix roads, to build community centers, et cetera,
Right.
that money gets appropriated in 1 year, but it might be 2 years later when they actually start working on that project.
Okay, so you're saying that was an overspill from Obama? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if it was or it wasn't, but typically that's the case. I mean, they appropriated the money to put the cover on the expressway. That money was encumbered last year.
And the reason I'm asking this question is because we were talking, and people was telling me, well, when Obama was in, we did get the health care, but even with that, there was some restrictions on some things. But when Trump came in our neighborhoods, people were buying more cars, people had more money to spend. So, and I had to you know what? I started scratching my head and
Right. So I just want you to understand. Here's the context of that.
Okay.
As a result of the tax cuts that Trump pushed through Congress, you had a lot of people who paid lower taxes or weren't paying any taxes at all. So you had people that had money in their hands. They didn't have money before.
Right.
But what was the price for that? When those people needed Medicaid and their income was in that $30,000 to $50,000 range, they couldn't qualify, right? Because that was cut out. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, had provided a means to ensure that everybody had a baseline of health insurance that was paid for by the country.
Right.
And then you had to pay for more health insurance on your own with private contracts. Well, that wasn't done around the country. There are at least 17 states that wouldn't accept that money from the state. So those people didn't get that help.
Wow.
And so on. So you got to understand how this all goes. And the other side of this is the issue that you're dealing with right now with this huge deficit that you are not able, because you don't have enough money coming in to pay for your expenses. If they lowered expenses, enough to wipe out the deficit, those people that had those cars you're talking about, and those people that said that they got some Kleenex, from the family health care clinic, they wouldn't be getting that stuff because there wouldn't have been any money, for them to get those services.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nora.
Let me just add, I'd like to say, so many things I believe are attributed to kind of the trickle down effect.
Right.
You have certain things that are in office during, let's just say, times going back to President Clinton, and what they've done. Let's utilize infrastructure as one of the things. They pass things down, pass the buck, and at a certain point, different things might erupt or disrupt or break down over a period of time, and it's attributed to a certain president or under his under the time that he's in office. That things it's a trickle down, and the buck is passed all the time. And Donald Trump, let me just add one last thing. Donald Trump takes credit for all good, and then he deflects
and blames.
He deflects and blames everything that's all bad or under his particular control.
Usually against Obama, because Donald Trump ran on the campaign that, do you all see what happened?
Yeah.
You hired one of those others to be the president of the United States. This is going to become the trend in the United States if we don't stop it now. Hire me, and I will make America whatever you want again.
Right. Whatever. Right.
He's basically,
And you could fill in the blank.
He's a great salesman, and that's what he does.
That's
So
what
he didn't have to sell that message. People already wanted that message.
Yeah.
They were just happy they had somebody who would be their champion.
They're ready to eat that up from the beginning.
Right.
And
See,
that's
so in every instance, when Reagan lowered taxes, deficits went up. When Bush lowered taxes, deficits went up. When Bill Clinton raised taxes, deficits got abolished. The deficits and the debt got abolished.
Right.
And the United States still had one of its lowest unemployment rates and its highest GDPs in the history of the country.
Yeah.
So you would think that you would hire somebody like him when he finished his second term. We need somebody like Bill Clinton.
Right.
Let me go find somebody like him, whether it's Al Gore or whoever. But you would have found somebody else. But no, they went and found the second George Bush. Why would you hire him and let him seduce you into thinking that the problem that you are most faced with is they're taxing you too high and taking too much of your money. So we should lower taxes for individuals, lower them even more for business, and that's going to make apple pies fall on everybody's plate. Well, that didn't happen, did it?
No.
And it never does happen. And then when so the second George Bush, his deficits went from 158 billion to 421 billion. Okay, over the course of his 8 years. Now, keep in mind he had some drama, but this is what I mean by the unpredictability of affairs. Nobody could have predicted that the World Trade Center bombing was going to take place.
Right.
But we could predict that if we went into two wars in two different countries to so-called fight the war on terrorism, that we were going to have to pay for the cost of fighting those wars.
Yes, sir.
That money wasn't going to come out of Afghanistan's pocket. That money was going to come out of the United States taxpayers' pockets. And that's what it did. So by the time the second George Bush got done, our deficits were almost $500 billion. Then under Trump, the people that you hired because you thought, well, he's going to lower taxes and stop spending money. And the other thing was to stop spending money on the others, because that's how these people take it. They take it that taxes are being taken from everybody, but they feel like more of us are paying taxes than these others are paying taxes. So that means taxes are being taken from us, and the services are being provided for the thems, for the others. That's how they look at it. So Donald Trump promised to take this the other way. He said, I'm going to reduce taxation for you, and I'm going to reduce services to those others. And that's exactly what he did. As a consequence, deficits rose from 685, deficits rose from 665 billion to 3.132 trillion over the course of Donald Trump's administration. His administration going from 2017 through 2020, his administration accounted for over 7.2, I believe, trillion dollars of the actual debt that the country has right now. That's what we got in return for accepting Donald Trump's framework for policy governance of the United States. So the Republicans today are ruling out tax increases. No, we can't have any tax increases to balance the budget, and we can't use tax increases to reduce the deficit. So I went to an article written by Arthur Delaney, Republicans on this subject, written in the Huffington Post. Says Republicans say the national debt is one of the greatest threats to the United States of America, but they're only halfway filling to fight the deficit or to fight the debt. The U.S. government has borrowed $31 trillion in order to cover annual budget deficits, resulting from a near constant mismatch between spending and revenue. Congress could slow the growth of the debt by cutting spending and raising revenue. But the Republicans have ruled out raising revenue. So they lower revenue with no balance. When Donald Trump lowered corporate taxes from 35% to 21%, he was not required, and he made no attempt to come up with some other kind of revenue or some other lowering of expenses to be able to make up for that shortfall of money. But nobody had a problem with that. You know, Donald Trump, he's our guy. If he can't do it, never mind. But the point I'm making is that debt was created that way. Now that we're in the debt situation, we're hearing from Kevin McCarthy, quote, "We're not going to raise taxes. We have more revenue coming into the country in a 50-year average than any other time in history." What does that mean? We have more money coming into the country on a 50-year average than any time in the history of the country. So what?
That's utilizing a big average just to make it fit.
I mean, if we look at minimum wage over the last 50 years, minimum wage would have been below $3 an hour. Are we going to lower everybody's payroll down to $3 an hour?
Can't afford to.
That's just a stupid statement.
Yeah.
But stupid people make stupid statements. So when you know somebody's stupid and they say something stupid, you should take that as confirmation. You shouldn't repeat what that person is saying. And so Kevin went on to say only 2 other times did we have a higher percentage in average revenue coming in. So I asked, what's the relevance of the statement? The United States has grown in population from 1970 to 2023, right? We had about 210 or 20 million people in 1970. We have 330 plus million people today. Obviously, our economy is bigger. The country's bigger. There's more money out here that's being made. So naturally, there's going to be more revenue being collected for taxes, right? But Kevin McCarthy just wants to be viewed as being an important player. And he really, more than anything else, he wants to be treated as if he's the equal of Joe Biden. That's where Kevin McCarthy is coming from.
He's actually utilizing a whole lot of gaslighting and deflection to make the country think that something is what it's not. And, you know, it's crazy.
So that's why the Republicans have refused to support a bill raising the debt ceiling. They're taking credit. They say, we passed a bill to raise the debt ceiling. You all just didn't go along with it. That bill required cutting all discretionary services that were not for the military and for the Veterans Affairs department, to cut all other expenses by 18% across the board. That just can't be done. But that's what he was. That's what the Republicans in the House of Representatives passed as their debt ceiling, their bill to raise the debt ceiling. So the White House had also proposed closing tax loopholes, but the Republicans refused to do that. So it's a high-stakes hostage situation. The government could default on its debts in less than 2 weeks, potentially destabilizing the financial system and skewering America's economy. McCarthy's claim about record revenues is a little outdated. The historical average for tax revenue as a percentage of overall economic activity, which is the most common metric for measuring the scale of the tax burden, that tax revenue as a percentage of GDP is about 17.4%, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Government. Tax receipts clocked in at about 20% of gross domestic product in 2022, but they have been trending downward since that time and now amount to about 17.7% of GDP over the course of the past 12 months. So that means that taxes today as a percentage of GDP are on par, are exactly at the average that taxes have been for the past 50 years. So how can we be overtaxing if we're taxing at the same basic rate that we've been taxing for the last 50 years in terms of the percentage of GDP that gets consumed in taxes?
Yeah.
So this is what I mean when I tell you people are lying to you. People say things that might on their surface be true, but the context in which they're saying it is conveying a lie to you.
Yeah.
Right. So saying that we're at the highest, rate of collecting taxes as a percentage of GDP over the past, the average over the past 50 years sounds like, oh my God, we're raising taxes that much, without telling you that that's been the norm every year for ad infinitum. Over the next 50 years is going to be the same rate, right? That's the rate that we have been taxing people. In 2022, according to Mark Goodwin, he says that it was a fabulous revenue year, but it wasn't indicative of a trend. He says this is the same pattern, this issue of lowering taxes and not really tackling expenses is the same issue that we started having with Ronald Reagan in the Laffer, I think it was Arthur Laffer or something Laffer, or Michael Milken, one of the two, that the trickle down theory, right? That if we keep money in the hands or put more money in the hands of the job creators, they'll create more jobs by expanding their businesses and starting new businesses, and we'll all get better, as a result. But that is not what occurs. It's the same pattern of thinking that the second George Bush administration had. Based on the Clinton budget surpluses, they campaigned on the basis of reducing taxes, saying that we were being overtaxed, by the federal government. The world's unpredicted budget busting realities exploded in the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and the two anti-war the two anti-terror wars that the United States fought against Afghanistan and against Iraq. That was not that hadn't been planned for. That's why you have surpluses, so that you can deal with things that you didn't plan for, right? If we had surpluses and the pandemic occurred, we would have been able to use the surpluses to pay for the things that needed to be paid for to help us deal with the pandemic. But we had to do something that I've said many times as it was occurring, and I'll repeat it again. We borrowed $6 trillion from the future to pay for expenses that we were incurring in the present. Pandemic gets started in 2020. We start borrowing money to deal because the pandemic created needs for us to do things that cost money. And where was the money going to come from? The money that we already had was spoken for. Right. So we had to borrow money. And where do we borrow the money from? We're borrowing the money from the future, which means we're praying that the future is not only going to produce enough money to pay for the bills that we had originally in 2019 that were baked into the budget, but we also had to get enough money in the future to pay for the borrowing of the $6 trillion that we borrowed from the future. Well, what happens if we don't earn enough money to pay for that $6 trillion that we borrowed from the future? then we're not going to have enough money to pay for what's going to be the present 4 years from now, 3 years from now, 7 years from now. We're not going to be able to pay those bills because that money already got borrowed to pay for 2020, 2020, and 2021's bills. That's the situation that we find ourselves in right now. But if we were taxing ourselves at the normal rate that other of the 36, 37 other competitive democratic capitalist countries in the world, if we taxed ourselves at the same rate that they did, then we would have another $10 trillion that would be in our pockets. I'm not saying that we should tax that level, but we could tax another 10% over what we're taxing right now. And that would have created that $10 trillion so that we'd be able to pay the $6 trillion off and still have a surplus.
Right.
We have to rethink. You have to, at some point, you got to pay the price. You know what I mean? If you put yourself in a deficit situation, in a debt situation, at some point you have to pay the price to pay for that debt. We're not willing to pay that price yet. That's the problem. So McCarthy implied that having more revenue means the government has more than enough money to be able to pay for its expenses. But that's a stupid statement. That doesn't make any sense. That's not true. So overall, federal spending surged by about 30% of GDP in 2020, thanks largely to the bipartisan response to the coronavirus. Spending has leveled out at an above average rate. Outlays will remain elevated through the next decade as more older Americans start to retire. Remember, you got this other budget busting anomaly that is already here. We fought this war in 1941 and 1945. 3 or 4 million Americans fought in that war. When they came back, either just before they left some seed and some kids were born while they was away at the war. When they came back, they had some more seed and some more kids got born, for that time period. So we ended up with this period between 1941 and 1951 where you had this baby boom period because there were so many people that got married and had kids because of the push, around the war, that we had this huge number of people per year that we didn't have in years before or since. But now every 18, 20 years, you see the kids of the baby boomer kids, those kids start having kids. And then those kids' start having kids, right? Then these are the bubbles that are moving through our society. Well, the same way that we have people being born, that bubble coming through the society, we also have people getting old, right? So the people that were 18, 19, 20, 23 years old in 1940, 1941, well, in 1960, I know we only got 3 minutes left. See how he does me? 1960, those kids that were 18 are now 38, right? So those kids got kids that are now 20 years old. And then in 1980, the grandkids of the baby boomer kids have kids, right? And we're in that situation right now. But the baby boomers themselves, that's what I was trying to get to, they themselves are starting to retire. And now they're not going to be alive for 80, 90 years, but they're going to be alive for 20 years, 20, 25 years, and they're going to be using what? Social Security.
Right, that's correct.
And
that's right.
Medicare, right? So you can't be talking about you're going to cut Social Security benefits and Medicare when the people who fought the war that created the ability for you to be here in the first place,
Right.
for you to say you're not going to maintain your faith to them is just incredibly insane.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of country would do that?
Yeah.
So you've got to raise taxes on individuals and you got to raise taxes back on corporations so that you can create the money pool that you need to be able to balance your revenues and your
Right.
expenditures. That just has to be done.
Right.
You have to increase the debt ceiling because you already bought the things that you have to pay for. You can't not pay
Right.
for the things you already bought.
Well, when you explain it like that, taxes never made sense to me. But the way you put it, it now makes big sense.
And I was looking at this other article written by Jackie Combs. When McCarthy's spending cuts are spelled out, even Republicans Balk. And what they were talking about, he says that the Republicans, whose appetite for spending is well established, would subject just 13% of the federal budget to the knife. What he's saying is that if you take out mandatory spending on Medicare and Medicaid, you take out mandatory spending on, or not mandatory, discretionary spending on the military, you take out, I forget what the other pieces are that are the mandatory parts of the government, but when you take those things out, and of course interest payments, when you take those things out, you only have about 13% of the budget left to cut in the first place. So if you got to cut basically, what is it, roughly $500 billion from the federal expenditures, but you only got 13% of the budget that you can go at, that means that 13% is going to have to be cut by about 7%. You have to cut them in half. That means Head Start's not going to exist. That means that the community or federal quality health centers will stop to existing. The HEAP program will go out of existence. I mean, there's a whole range of things that are core elements of how we live as a society that would have to disappear. Republicans aren't telling you that. The Republicans are saying we want you to hit that number, and they want the Democrats to come up with the way to meet those expense reductions. If the Republicans are serious, they should come up with what it is that they want to see cut, and let the public see what they want to do. They don't want to do that. They just want to put a number out there and then say, Joe Biden, you come up with the strategy on how to cut the other parts of the federal budget. So that's the situation that we're in right now. It's important that you understand this context so that when people are talking to you, ask them to tell you fundamentally, if we do what you say to me, what is it that you would cut? Would you cut Social Security? Oh, no. You cut Medicare? No. Well, what is it you'll cut? Medicaid? What are you going to cut? You're going to cut veterans benefits? What are you going to cut? You're going to cut aid to public schools around the country? What are you going to cut? They won't tell you what they want to cut because they'd have to own that. That means people would run political commercials against them for cutting that stuff. So what they do is just say, well, I just want you to cut by 22%. You figure it out.
Well, Mr. Hill, we're going to have to cut.
That's just cold. That's just cold. I see how you all are.
We almost 2 minutes over.
Listen, hey, well, welcome to the weekend.
One bad man to another.
And another one. Listen, I thank you all for I'm hoping that this made some sense what we were trying to share with you today. We got a lot that's in front of us. We look forward to talking to you all on Monday. Be safe over the course of the weekend. We'll see you all on Monday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. See you all then.
Sound coming up for the morning light. 2, 4, 6, 8, never too late. Me and my radio running on through the night. 3, 5, 7, 9, I'll never what line. Motorway sound coming up for the morning light. Motorway sound coming up for the morning light. That same old